Right then, this wasn't supposed to be a video on how to keep a giant backdrop from falling on your head, but that's going to happen at some point because it just won't stay there. I don't do rants on this channel. I like to keep my YouTube channel happy and friendly and away from all this miserable crap that we're seeing too much of these days. So, but this is going to be a rant. This is going to be my first, I think, ever rant publicly anyway. Now it's about the histogram, because I'm fed up with people saying, particularly YouTubers, saying that this is how a histogram should look and that it needs to be a hill no matter what photograph you're taking. The amount of people that I see saying that a histogram should look like a hill in the middle. Well, anyway, it shouldn't. That's just a crap, and we're going to calm. But what's a histogram to start with? If you're just starting photography now, you're learning your exposure triangle. You need to learn. You need to put your histogram on there as well. It's vital that you know what a histogram is. So the histogram is this graph on the bottom of see it on the back of the Nikon there. You've got this graph which showing as I move around. If I put anything white in there, the histogram jumps around. So the histogram is a graph basically that shows you the luminance, the amount of light that's coming in and hitting your sensor. So what you have to bear in mind is that is going to be unique to every photograph you take. It's not going to look the same on every photograph. Okay, I don't know why people think it is, but it doesn't. So this is a perfectly exposed photograph of, well, nothing apart from this black thing, if I get out of the way. If I put that grey thing there, you can see the histogram's changed to that. I've put that white thing there, the histogram's changed to that. So there we are, the histogram changes depending on what's in the photograph. The easiest way of using a histogram is to ask yourself, what are you taking a photograph of? And to imagine it black and white. So what you can do is on the back of this Nikon, I've got a shortcut, so I can press that record button and I can go through and I can select something like monochrome. Okay, so I can select monochrome, turn everything black and white, and I can ask myself, much like in the photograph here, which is a bit convenient. I've got a photograph here. This is my F8 magazine, my street photography magazine. So if you're into street photography, do check out F8 magazine. Bit of a shameless plug there, apologies for that. But this is an image by Gavin Prest, not my photograph. But it's black and white, and we can look at it and say, is there anything black in there? Yes. Is there anything white in there? Yes. Is there anything 50% grey in there? Yes. So we can use this image and plonk it in front of the Nikon and see what the histogram would have looked like. Now, I can't quite see how that very accurately. So it might be. It looks like it's exposed okay. I can't see the histogram very accurate, but we can see that it's showing the detail. There you go. If I drop it down, there's no white, and if I come up here, it looks like it might be clipping. Is it clipping? I can't see very well. But there you go. You've got a histogram for that photograph that Gavin Preston took. Okay, so it's showing all the tonal value, all the light value in your photograph. It's not supposed to be a lump in the middle. The only way it's supposed to be a lump in the middle, if you're photographing something that, if you imagine it was grey, was 50% grey. If you're photographing something that was only I don't know, there. If that's how your photograph is supposed to look, I'm wrecking it now, aren't I? But you make an executive decision on what the picture, mess this up now, of what your picture should look like, okay? So if you haven't got anything that's 50% grey in your image, let's just put, for example, this white box on there. So looking at the histogram, if I get out of the way, you've got black on the histogram and you've got white on the histogram. There's nothing 50% grey in there. If there is, it's a flipping tiny amount. And I'm struggling to see the histogram on that little screen over there. But that's white, that's black. There's nothing 50% grey in there. Okay, if I put that in there, it changes things. But obviously, that's not 50% grey. But the point is that the histogram, exposing this perfectly, if I adjust the exposure, I'm struggling to see the little tiny histogram on the screen over there, but if I expose that perfectly, there's nothing grey in, there's nothing 50% grey in the photograph. So the histogram needs to reflect that. Why would there be a lump in the middle of my histogram now? There wouldn't. So that, get rid of that, and all of a sudden the histogram buggers off back to the left again. Okay, you're clipping the left. We put that back, histogram's back over to the right. So the histogram is a direct representation of what's in the scene. Don't try and get your camera settings so that you get a lump in the middle, unless you've decided that okay, I'm going to expose to the right. I'm going to get everything to the right like we did there. We've got the histogram. That's what they call exposing to the right. So the histogram now is all the way to the right. Any further than that, and the image will start to clip. You'll start losing data. You won't be able to recover that information. A bit like photographing the sun. When you photograph the sun, you clip the sun. You deliberately clip the sun. You know that you're not trying to expose for the sun. If you did that, you wouldn't be able to see anything else. Okay, no matter what camera you've got, you wouldn't be able to see anything else. So if exposed for the sun, it'd be gone. So you make a decision on what the histogram's telling us. If I want to clip that white box, I make a decision based on what that histogram's telling me. I decide to clip that white box. But if I don't want to, and let's put these black binoculars, they're not. Well, obviously you're going to have dark parts. You've got a black background. You've got these dark areas of the binoculars. You've got the light hitting the side. But the histogram's not showing us anything on the right-hand side. Does that mean it's underexposed? I haven't got a lump in the middle of my histogram. Does that mean it's wrong? So people need to understand that the histogram represents what's in your photograph. If I put this box in the picture with the binoculars, all of a sudden now, without even having to look, I know that I've got white in there. I know my histogram is going to show me white because there is white in the picture. If I get rid of the white box, there's no white in the picture. You know, likewise, if I put something 50% grey in the picture, the histogram is going to move over for that. But it all represents what's in your frame. Okay, so let's spice it up a little bit more. Let's use these headphones. This is difficult because I can't see the back of the camera. Right, I'm ranting a little bit because I'm getting fed up with YouTube people, not just photographers, but YouTube in general giving out crap information. So anyway, here's some headphones. Can we see them headphones okay? I don't know. It's difficult for me to see what's going on that screen. Right. I feel like I need to check the exposure of them headphones. Let me just check. Exposure is absolutely fine, so we're all right. So the brightest part now of this scene is the white here, the light grey. It's not white. You know, it's not that white. But if I put that white thing there, I could take a meter reading off this white card if I wanted to. I could use the white to decide that if anything else that comes in there should be less of white than that, then it would be exposed correctly. But I'm going to ignore that. I'm just going to look at the brighter area here and the histogram, and it's difficult to see, but it's not showing any clipping. But that's the brightest part. So that histogram represents exactly, if I get out of the way, if I put my whitish hand there, it's going to mess things up. But just looking at that light area there, it's represented on the histogram. But if we use the exposure then, am I going the wrong way? That's darkening it. Man, it's hard to see. So if I brighten it up, I can make these decisions, and I can see what the tonal value is doing to the histogram. As I brighten that up, I've clipped now. I've gone well overexposed. You can see that there's some shadow information appearing that we don't want. So we can use that histogram. You could almost take, if I could see the histogram properly, you could almost take photographs of a scene without actually seeing the scene. A bit like a light meter. You just take the light meter reading, and you would just let the film then develop it. So with a histogram, you could almost look at a photograph. For example, now, if I was going to take a photograph of a polar bear in the snow, the histogram would be all the way pretty much to the right. It would be pretty much like that. Okay? If the histogram was like people are suggesting, in the middle, and I was taking a photograph of a polar bear in the snow, and the histogram looked like that, all my pictures are going to be underexposed. The histogram should be the polar bear in the snow pictures. The histogram should pretty much be there, about 2 or 3 stops over what your camera thinks it should be. Okay, if you're in auto, so you have to compensate for it. But this is where histograms becomes so vital. If you're using an auto setting, you use the histogram to say on camera, you think that I'm photographing something that's that colour, because the camera will automatically try and find an average of that colour. So this is when you look at your histogram and say, no. I'm photographing something that's supposed to be white, or I'm photographing something that's supposed to be black. Well, if I photograph that without anything in it on a black background, my camera's going to think, hang on a minute, that should be 20% grey, that should be that colour. So it's going to overexpose everything. It's going to try and automatically brighten it up. So you use your histogram to say, no, it's supposed to be that colour. It's supposed to be black, or it's supposed to be white. I'm telling you it needs to be that colour, and you need to see that in your histogram. Okay, so the histogram is really, really important. So I've lost track now of what we've done. We've done the white box, haven't we? So we know that the white box is doing that. We've done the black area there, so we haven't got anything white in the frame now. So we've only got these dark tones. See what happens when I put my hand in there? My hand is shown by, what would we say, 30%, 25% grey, my hand. So it's showing up on there. Now if we put something in that's got a reflective surface, like the chrome parts of this camera, can we see that? Now, this is where you take, with commercial photography, I can't really see that histogram. you would use that. You would make an executive decision based on what you want to clip. You would always push the histogram to the right to get as much shadow information as possible. So you're not then brightening up in Lightroom or Photoshop later and losing detail. You would take the photograph on location, getting it right in camera, but using the histogram to get as much light on the sensor as possible, where applicable, because we've obviously just used a black example and that didn't work then. But now we've got these reflective areas, and we need to, like we would the sun, if we were photographing the sun, we say, hang on a minute, I've got to take a picture of my kids in front of the sun on the beach, but I don't want to photograph a meter for the sun. I want the histogram to blow the sun out. But when I see that clipping, I need to know that it's the sun that's clipping. In the same way as when I take a photograph of this, any shiny areas here, I mean, you'd probably bracket it and get the extra dynamic range. But for argument's sake, I would make an executive decision if something's clipping on the side of here and think, well, I'm not going to meter for that shine that's bouncing the flashback because the rest of the picture will be too dark. I'm going to let that overexpose and I might draw it in afterwards. But you make these executive decisions. So you decide, well, okay, I want to clip that, so I'll get more dynamic range, I'll get more shadow information, or I'm going to take a base image, I'm going to get the shadow, to get the histogram as far to the right as possible, and then bracket it or something like that. So you've got the, so you make these decisions, but you can't base a histogram on the same thing. You can't say, well, his histogram looks like that, so every photograph, and it came out well, so every photograph's histogram needs to look like a lump. Because you're spending all this money on expensive cameras like these, and then you're getting back and you've got underexposed files that you're lifting, you're brightening up in Lightroom, you're sliding your exposure, then you're lifting your shadows, and you're crucifying your raw files. Whereas if you've got the histogram to the right when applicable, on location for like a sun or for like where the waves were going to clip, and you've got all this creative control and all this, you're getting the most out of your camera. But I'm getting fed up with seeing so many people saying that your histogram needs to be a lump in the middle. It's not. It represents, if you're taking a photograph of a black cat and a black mat or in a cave or whatever, and there's no white on the cat, then the histogram would be, I don't know, like that ish. Probably the wrong example because it's got the shines on it, isn't it? But this is your black cat, isn't it? So your histogram would be kind of like that. That would be the histogram for the black cat. Yeah, you can see the tone in the cat. You can see the tone. So that's what your histogram would look like. If you're photographing a wedding, I was just in a wedding the other day, and if I was photographing a bride next to a groom, and the bride's wearing white and the groom's wearing black, that histogram is my best friend. I need to make sure that when I'm photographing the bride, under no circumstances is that wedding dress going to clip. I need to make sure. It needs to be 100%. Without any shadow of a doubt. If it is clipping because it's too bright, you put the bride in the shade, and then you think, well, okay, the shade is okay for retaining highlights, but now outside of the shade on the beach or whatever, that's clipping. Well, that's okay, but you can see that in a histogram, and you make that decision. If you decide that outside, if you weren't to do that, then the bride and groom would be too dark, in which case you need a flash. But the histogram is there to tell you that. If you just use your LCD to get it right, and then you come back and you think, oh, my LCD is a lot brighter than I thought it was, or my LCD is a lot darker than I thought it was, you're not going to get these accurate exposures, and you're going to be in a mess. You're going to be using ISOs that you shouldn't be using, too high. You're going to be using slower shutters when you shouldn't be. You're going to have blurry images, or you're going to be using wide open apertures when you didn't need to. But the histogram is there. You just need to know how to use it. Anyway, rant over. There are going to be examples where histograms aren't that, like astrophotography. If you're doing the Milky Way and stuff, you don't necessarily pay that much attention to the histogram then, unless you've got some sort of ambient light that might be clipping, or the moon. The moon is an obvious one, and you don't want to clip the moon. You want to retain the detail. So you're always going to be looking at your histogram. Make it your best friend. Honestly, I don't want to make this video miserable. I don't want to make it too long, but make the histogram. I can't express it enough. Make your histogram your best friend. Learn your exposure triangle, but learn your histogram, and also learn that when you press play, you're not seeing a raw histogram. You're seeing a JPEG. So make sure that you know how to go over to flat or something like that, because you get them. If you can see the histogram change. You can see it change. So you get a more accurate version of the histogram when you're shooting flat. And on the Fuji, you've got natural live view, and I use it on the Fuji all the time. Use it every day. It's a bit. Check it on your camera. Do some tests. But your standard profiles, like your landscape, your portrait, your standard, all these normal profiles like monochrome, what we were using, they're not accurate. They're giving you a JPEG histogram view, so they're not going to be accurate for your raw. Okay, so do some tests. If you've got if you've got a Olympus, if you've got a Sony, if you've got a Canon, if you've got a whatever, Fuji, do some tests, have a look at your histogram, get used to it. But honestly, learn to predict. You should be able to take a photograph and predict what your histogram is going to look like. And if you're standing there asking yourself, like this picture on the back, you've got black, you've got white, you've got 50% grey. Is it going to be all the way throughout the histogram? Yes, it is. So just, if I take a photograph of that, is there anything on the left-hand side of the histogram? No, there isn't. If I take a photograph of that, is there anything in the middle of the histogram? No, there isn't. So just have that ability in your head and stop listening to these people who are telling you otherwise. Anyway, rant over, and do check out FA Magazine. It's an amazing street photography book. If you're into street photography, you can obviously use these details below, and you can feature your images in the magazine, and join the use the hashtag, join the Facebook group as well. So anyway, rant over. As you were, happy smiley Gareth again. I hope this makes a difference. Take care, guys. Thanks for watching.